Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 12th of January 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson, as always. And we're delighted to be joined by David Scott with Northern Exposure. David, of course, reporting from north of the border. Trump.
Yes, David. The BBC this morning pretty upset that they had to use this word. Well, you've got Haaretz here saying shameful Jewish American groups respond to Trump's comment on immigrants. I don't know how far we're going to dance around this particular word, but tell us your thoughts on what Trump has done here.
Trump is a gift that just keeps on giving. This has been so beautiful. I'll read you first of all what it actually was, and apologies for anyone. We'll use the actual word, and I hope no one will be offended. Trump was involved in a meeting talking about DACA and immigration reform, and then he at one point exclaimed, quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?" And he suggested that they should have more people from places like Norway. This left lawmakers, quote, taken aback. I bet it did. And one of the most beautiful points of this has been watching CNN describe it and all of the fake outrage that he used this word. Oh, it's so terrible. Can we bring ourselves to even say this word? It's been absolutely hilarious. These people who are as foul-mouthed as can be off camera, pretending to be whiter than white in front of it. It's just ridiculous. Now, Haaretz, a couple of comments from Haaretz. The Anti-Defamation League called Trump's words shameful and profoundly offensive. There's some irony there, because I find the Anti-Defamation League shameful and profoundly offensive, adding that they were beneath the dignity of the office. Clinton is the reference to that. The American Jewish Committee stated people have a fundamental dignity. True, we can't accept everyone, but all deserve the chance to try, pursue the American dream, and contribute their talents to our nation of immigrants. Now, you see what's happening there. They're casting America as a nation of immigrants and suggesting that everyone must have a lottery to go into America. America's not a nation of immigrants. America was a nation of settlers, of colonists, and of the descendants of those colonists, and it was ethnically very homogeneous until Irish, Italian, and German immigration, much later after it was founded. The idea that it's this melting pot is a relatively recent concoction. Rabbi Jonah, president of the Reform Movement Religious Action Center, wrote that Trump's vulgarity is deeply offensive, and added that even more so is lack of compassion or understanding of what makes the US a beacon for all those seeking freedom, safety, and opportunity. Trump is unfit to lead this great, diverse nation of immigrants from every walk of life. So again, we're seeing this talking point. It's a nation of immigrants. It's to get away from any sense of a more cohesive national identity, and this is why Trump won. Trump said, no, we're not all things to all people. We're American, and I'm going to look after Americans first. And that's what people responded to. And I think the ordinary people who voted for him will look at this and they'll look at the comments he made and say, actually, yes, we see what he's saying. He's communicating in simple language. We understand this. And all the full outrage from CNN won't change that.
But perhaps the irony is where people that are emigrating to America are coming from in the first place.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the big change has, of course, been Mexican and Latino immigration into America. That's been the major change. It's not actually Syrians or Africans or anything like this.
But I mean, this graph from the United Nations, David, seems to suggest that there is already more immigration into the United States from Europe than there is from Africa.
Yes, absolutely. You're seeing the references he's making don't stack really with the true extent or the true nature of the problem as faced in America, which is his comments would have been perhaps more true of Europe. But the underlying issue is America's changing, and the people who built it are looking around and they're not liking the change, and they're being disadvantaged by the change, and that's what's propelling Trump and populism on both sides of the Atlantic.
And of course, David, the response to that is censorship in the media. And here we have a new announcement from Facebook and from Zuckerberg himself, Mark Zuckerberg, saying that he is changing the way that Facebook works, and particularly the way that the newsfeed works on Facebook, because the newsfeed, he says, is being crowded out by businesses, brands, and the media. And so he's going to change things so that people that are sharing stuff about parties they went to or the latest photograph of their children, that's going to get priority. He said that since there's more public content and posts from your friends and family, the balance of what's in the newsfeed has shifted away from the most important thing Facebook can do, help us connect with each other. He said that posts from publishers like news organizations are likely to feature less in news feeds. He said, if we do the right thing, I believe it will be good for our community and our business over the long term too. But I'm not sure whether this is going to be good for either, because Facebook already, I'm seeing increasing noise from people saying they're leaving Facebook for a host of different reasons, including the perception of censorship. David?
Yes, and Twitter's the same. Twitter, the Project Veritas people have been exposing what's been going on in Twitter and the naked political manipulation of that organization. And again, people are leaving in large numbers. So the question is, can these businesses actually sustain the politically driven ideology that's taking over at the managerial level, or will it see them destroyed?
Well, that's a very good question, and perhaps they will come to regret their getting into bed with governments and law enforcement. So here's Europol announcing today that Facebook is getting into bed with them. This is Europol's Internet Referral Unit, and they've organised what they're describing as the 8th Joint Referral Action Day with colleagues from national referral units of Belgium, France and the United Kingdom to identify and secure the swift removal, these are their words, of terrorist and violent extremism content uploaded to Facebook and Instagram. The intensive referral campaign was hosted at Europol's headquarters in The Hague and is targeted content by terrorist groups and terrorist sympathisers aiming at radicalising, recruiting and propagating terrorist activities. But you know, as much as they say that this is what they're doing, I have to say, Brian, I have not seen much evidence of material emanating from the Middle East, from Syria, from the terrorist groups in these countries actually being taken down from Facebook. Rather, I'm seeing material from the likes of us or 21st Century Wire or some of the other alternative media outlets that are criticising terrorism in the Middle East being taken down.
I think that's absolutely right. We've never seen evidence. Every time you look for the evidence about this massive terrorist threat, you simply don't find it, and you simply don't see it on the internet. We just have to believe that British and American intelligence agencies, or indeed European intelligence agencies, have the evidence, but none of those agencies ever put the evidence in front of the public. So that's one danger. Let's come in at a different angle. Now, this is a Daily Mail journalist by the name Tanith Carey, and I picked up on a very good article that she's produced about child stealing. But whilst I was having a look at that article, I had a look at her and came upon this tweet. So she'd retweeted from Kelly Rose Bradford, disgraceful that unelected, press-despising old farts hold this power. And then the embedded tweet there from a Matt Hancock is the House of Lords have just voted to restrict press freedoms. This vote will undermine high-quality journalism, fail to resolve challenges the media face, and is a hammer blow to local press. We support a free press and will seek to overturn these amendments in the Commons.
Now, just to clarify, that is the Matt Hancock, because he's got a blue tick there, which means that is the former digital minister who's now the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport.
Right, thank you for alerting me to that, Mike. The important thing about this sequence of tweets is that the Daily Mail journalist actually had to rely on what Guido Fawkes had been saying about this very issue. And Guido sounding the alarm very strongly, encouraged people to go to the Guido website to have a look at this article, but we can bring it up on screen here. And he is really getting into the heart of it. Unelected, unaccountable and unknown to the British reading public, a gang of press-hating peers last night forced a double defeat on the government, which could pave the way for Leveson too. And this is very, very dangerous stuff. Of course, UK Column published a huge amount on Leveson, and we warned what was going on. We warned about the role of common purpose in the background. And now we see mainstream newspapers having to rely on Guido Fawkes to get the truth out about how dangerous this suppression of free speech in the media is. So I'm just going to bring that journalist back on screen there and say, how is it that these journalists are simply not waking up to the fact that there is a censorship regime closing in around them, and they can't seem to recognise it, Mike? It's quite incredible.
Well, not only do they not recognise it, but they seem to pander to it in some ways, because they are unchallengingly publishing the government rhetoric without any consideration of whether it's actually correct or not.
Yeah. Well, we included that lady journalist in our tweets this morning, so she will hopefully be watching UK Column News today. And our challenge stands: how is it the mainstream journalists simply can't see that we've got a dictatorship coming into force, and that dictatorship needs full control of the press and media? And if that's not bad enough, let's bring in this lady, Sabine McNeill. I've got to say thank you very much to the people who did respond with regard to a court hearing yesterday. Astounding what has started to happen. Now, very quickly, the background to this case is that this lady was very outspoken around the Hampstead SRA ritualistic child abuse case. She worked with a lot of other individuals to support the mother to get the truth out about the scale and nature of the abuse to the children. And very quickly, she was picked up. Police are involved, and they have not let this, I think she's 74, the 74-year-old lady go. What do we know from the court case yesterday? Well, apparently she had a stage 1 pre-trial plea hearing yesterday. She pleaded not guilty to all 19 charges. 19 charges. And there's been a court hearing fixed for the 19th of November this year. 3 weeks allocated to it, Mike. What do you think the cost of a 3-week court case is?
Well, I don't know, but 3 weeks, that's the kind of length of time that you might consider a murder trial, for example?
Murder trial, or indeed some of the family court hearings are 2 to 3 weeks, and the accepted statistic is about 250,000 for a 2 to 3 week family court hearing. So maybe the same sort of figure. Let's just follow on through. The prosecution have got a QC as well as a junior counsel. Sabine's also going to have a QC. She's also going to need the services of a digital expert. This is where it gets really creepy. She's still going to stay on bail. She is not allowed to use the internet for anything, personal emails, watching films, music, listening to music. She's absolutely censored. And what is this to do with? It's to do with the fact that she was posting information about the Hampstead child abuse case. And apparently key to this court case coming up is the use and the linking of material. So you might not have put something out directly yourself, but there's a link, and you then become responsible in some way to the material that's published through on another site where that link, where you've connected to that link.
So this actually broadens this out way beyond child abuse, satanic ritual abuse, and what she has done to campaign on behalf of the family and the children.
Absolutely.
This goes to the basis of the internet as a whole, which is the idea that you can link to content, either to criticize that content or maybe to reinforce what you're saying. But you have no responsibility for what somebody else has published on the internet, but they seem to be implying that she has responsibility for linking to something that somebody else has said on the internet.
Yes. Now, we're desperately trying for more details over this case, but I can say there is a sense of fear around this case now that the clampdown is so draconian that people who have simply attended court and know about the case are almost frightened to speak out to say what this case is really about. This is Britain, this is Conservative Theresa May's Britain in 2018. If you speak out about child abuse, then the state is going to come looking for you. And we'll add this in as well, because let's come on to the BBC. Amazing little article, Mike, that was in the Saturday Mail, weekend just gone. I saw it, I was fascinated. Just 1 in 6 Britons say that they trust the BBC. What a headline. Have a look. That's just from Daily Mail Reporter. We don't know who produced the article. I'm going to bring it up on screen so that our viewers can have a look at that. What a headline. So we've got £3.74 billion worth of BBC, and this survey says only 1 in 6 people trust it. These are some of the key statements. Only 1/6 of Britons trust the BBC, a study has found. Only 17%, just over 1/6, said they trusted the BBC. And this was a poll of 2,000 commissioned by Credit Plus and carried out by onepoll.com. Now, I called onepoll.com this morning to see if I could get more detail, more evidence to back up that statement of 1 in 6 people. They told me very nicely that their client owns that data, and I'm hoping that the client, which is Credit Plus, will come back to me later today and I can get more information. But what a statement. Just 1 in 6 people in UK trust the BBC.
So value for taxpayers' money then?
Value for taxpayers' money. Now, very quickly, let's have a look at the Daily Mail, because while I was looking at that article about the 1 in 6 trusting the BBC, which you can see on the right of your screen, I was fascinated by a very big article about the Prime Minister backing a clean-up of plastic from beaches. Now, this is a subject which interests me. I've spent quite a lot of time at sea. I've seen the floating plastic in the middle of the Indian Ocean, for example, truly horrific. But what I was interested in here, Mike, is the timing. That what is going on at the moment of great interest? Well, it's Brexit. What is the Daily Mail publishing? The problem with plastic waste. Well, it wasn't just that page in the paper, because if we went to the editorial page, we had a double-page spread on the dangers of plastic. A massive article, big image. And why was I so interested in this? Well, let's come back to the UK column. And here is the front page from the UK column. This is April 2008. And what are we saying in the banner headline? Daily Mail spins pro-referendum rally and ignores treason. Their editorial team promoted plastic bags as more important than 3,000 demonstrators in Parliament. And this was a conversation I had with a gentleman, right? He was then editor or deputy editor, Benedict Brogan. I said to him on the phone, "Good afternoon. I'm calling to ask why the Daily Mail did not cover the EU referendum rally." This was to do with the Lisbon Treaty. "Your front page is covered in plastic bags." And Brogan said to me, "We didn't think it was particularly newsworthy relative to other things going on in the day. Every day we have to take a balance of view on the things that matter and we feel are important. Some things get squeezed out, and the demonstration was one of the things that got squeezed." So I said to him, so 3,000 people demonstrate at their parliament is squeezed out by plastic bags. That's a bit strange, isn't it? And this is what he said: "Not us. We feel there are far more people out there interested in the fate of the climate, and I think that plastic bags have become one of the great curses of the modern age, rather than those who are interested in the inevitability of the Lisbon Treaty."
Oh.
Well, what a statement. And isn't it remarkable that as Brexit now turns out to be complete treason on the British people the lie of an exit from the European Union. The Daily Mail is printing plastic. And if I may, I'll just pop, this was the UK column full article. If the resolution allows, you may be able to read that on screen. But 3,000 people demonstrated outside Parliament, seen by the Daily Mail. No report was made, neither was it reported by the BBC.
David, we've run through quite a bit of stuff there, but have you any comments?
A couple of quick ones, Mike. Will Sabine have a jury?
That is a good question. Don't know the answer to
that. We've experienced this in Scotland with Robert Greene. He was constantly threatened with indictment, a solemn indictment, which is potentially 5 years in jail, but requires a jury trial. And then the state constantly changed it to, well, we'll just put you in front of a judge. It'd be interesting to know whether the people are going to get a chance to pass comment on Sabine.
Yes.
And as far as the media, the alternative media now are the media. The degree of surrender of any integrity from CNN, BBC, and all of the people like them is so profound that the only media worth watching at all is coming from what's being called alternative.
That's absolutely correct, David. Okay, let's move on to privatisation of government departments and public service mutuals. The government has decided to put some money into public service mutuals. It's a small amount of money, £1.7 million. But what's this about? Well, Tracy Crouch had this to say. This £1.7 million funding will deliver training, support programmes and mentoring to expand the high-quality services mutuals provide to communities across the country. Of course, this isn't really about providing community services in the sense that perhaps that statement implies, because, of course, one of the best examples of a public organisation spun out into a mutual is the Behavioural Insights Team. Brian, this was a cabinet office initiative which was spun out from the public sector into a mutual, and other public sector groups, any departments within or organisations within government departments that feel like spinning themselves out into private organisations in a mutual form are being given the assistance of government. And just to put this into a little bit of perspective, here's the range of mutuals that exist already, or some statistics from government about that. So we've got one that's in the area of the arts. We've got a couple that are in adult education. We've got one which is labelled as ambulance. Two that are building control. Several in children's education. We've got a few in children's SEN, quite not sure what that is off the top of my head. We've got some in community safety, criminal justice, emergency planning, environment, fire and rescue, housing. So this goes right across the range of government services, and they are spinning these departments out and turning them into mutuals. And of course, David may have a view on whether these should be government services or whether they should be spun out into private organisations or not. But at the end of the day, we come back to this business of the fact that once these services are spun out into private companies, then these private companies attempt to pretend that the Freedom of Information Act, for example,
doesn't apply,
no longer applies. Now, we know that that is not the case, but you've got to challenge it. So what are your thoughts on this, David, turning government departments into cooperatives and mutuals?
Firstly, can they still take on debt? I would imagine the answer is yes. And I would imagine that this is not going to show up in the national statistics on the national debt. A lot of this is generated by simply hiding the balance sheet, hiding the red ink. The same with public-private partnerships. A wonderful idea, first created by Benito Mussolini. And it was all about keeping the government borrowing away from prying eyes and off the national balance sheet.
Yep.
Now the other thing is, this is not private sector. It's not putting things out to the private sector. It's very tightly state controlled. We see this in the charitable sector as well. It operates as an extension of government, but because the very limited power of oversight that the people have over government doesn't apply to these spin-off organisations to anything like the same degree, what actually transpires is government in secret.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Now let's move on to the National Health Service. And of course, there's a big furore, David, at the moment about flu vaccines and the flu epidemic in inverted commas, which is going on. At least this is how it's being presented in the mainstream press. The Public Health England have said that actually the flu cases that are happening at the moment aren't anything terribly different to what happens every other year. But we've got all this big furore over Aussie flu and all this kind of stuff. But the question in the BBC that you wanted to highlight here is, why do the majority of NHS staff not get the flu vaccine?
Yes, and it's a good question. The flu, incidentally, in Scotland has now reached the very scary level of moderate. So that's worth noting. 40% of the staff in the NHS in Scotland are getting the flu jab. And this has been criticised, been called selfish, you're putting your families at risk, you're putting your patients at risk. There's a sort of fear-mongering going on. Back in 2011, Dame Sally Davis criticised people who didn't get this injection as selfish. Now, but Carol Hennigan of University of Oxford has pointed out that the low uptake is essentially rational when you consider that the benefits for this injection are uncertain. I've been looking at some figures this morning, perhaps 9% efficacy rate. The flu jab, let us remember, is quite an unusual thing. If you look at a disease like smallpox, which is the classic one for vaccines, it was always realised that if you'd had smallpox and you'd survived, you were immune, you wouldn't get it again. Flu is not like that. It changes every year. There's a meeting at the start of the year to guess which strain is going to be prevalent, and that's what the vaccine's created for. So there's a very short duration of any sort of benefit from this vaccine, and a very short turnaround in creating it, which means the safety testing, etc., is necessarily constrained. And one thing that I was struck by is that the flu vaccine industry is something like 3 or 4 times larger than the entire vaccine industry for childhood vaccinations. So you're talking about very big money.
Well, that's absolutely true. And if you were driving past Brian's house at any time over the last several months, you'll see outside the local doctor's surgery a huge big sign saying, "Get your flu vaccine here." I wonder how many other business types are allowed to advertise in that way on the side of the street. Not many.
None is the answer. None. Because where they've attempted to do that locally with sort of those banners, and this is a very big banner, they've been told pretty quickly by the parish council and the local authority they're not allowed to do that.
Now, on top of that, a couple of people have expressed concerns, including from the medical profession, have expressed concerns to me recently that perhaps what we're going to see is some attempt to make vaccination of NHS staff mandatory.
Absolutely. If I can just jump through and pop this one. This was sent through to us in the last couple of days. What this is a screen capture of a screen within a hospital. I'm not sure which hospital it's come from, but what the person pointed out is that adverts and this is pushing staff to get their flu jabs is on screen in their own offices the whole time. So they're not allowed to turn these screens off, and there they are with a screen capture of the NHS pushing the flu vaccine at its own staff.
So, David, moderate flu in Scotland at the moment. We've got reports in the BBC and other places that flu has doubled in Scotland over the last couple of weeks, but the NHS demanding more money at this point.
Always demanding more money. The doctors are saying that the NHS is in crisis in Scotland, and that additional funding is essential if it's to stave off something. It's not exactly explained what the downside is going to be. Now, NHS funding in Scotland is already substantially more than it is in England, and we've come to a point where the welfare state is really taking all of the resources that can be squeezed out of the taxation system and a good bit more besides, which has been promised by our children via their future work and future taxation to be repaid. So there seems to be something more fundamental than just always asking for more resources. On the flu shots in Scotland, I know from the local hospitals in Glasgow and elsewhere, the flu shot has been pressed very heavily on NHS staff. Despite that, it's still only a 40% uptake, with good reason, it would seem.
Yes.
I have personal experience in my family of the effects of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a known side effect of the flu vaccine, and causes paralysis, and it's extremely severe. So there are genuine concerns, and anyone thinking about getting this should look into it very carefully, read the manufacturer's inserts, and research it carefully.
Yeah. Now, earlier on in the week, Brian, we discussed recruitment into the military and the new campaign for recruitment into the military. Now, you pointed out that recruitment, the company responsible for military recruitment in this country is Capita. But it seems that the government has decided to try to broaden this out a little bit and give other companies the opportunity to get involved in managing defence people. So this is the Defence People Challenge, which is part of the Defence and Security Accelerator. And they're holding a market interest day. Does this give you a warm feeling, a market interest day?
No, it doesn't give me a warm feeling at all. This is, in my opinion, more of the breakdown of the armed forces.
So this is going to take place on the 7th of February this year. And this follows the September 2016 launch of the Defence Innovation Initiative. And so they say that one of the priorities for innovation in defence is about how we can recruit, train, retain and motivate the right number of people and make the most efficient and effective use of its workforce, providing the skills required to adapt to a rapidly changing environment. The Defence People Challenge will ask companies to consider how their products and services could make a real difference to how defence approaches people management. And they then ask, are you a company working in this area and would you like to get involved? The event's aims are to share the challenges externally with the current marketplace, to collect wider external views in order to further assure/refine the challenges based on the current market, and to encourage collaborative bids.
Collaborative, yeah.
Yes, so we want collaborative bids there.
Partnership working. So innovation, the big word there, Mike, without any definition of what this innovation policy is, it's much like transformation. We're transforming the defence industries, but we don't define the transformation.
Yeah. Right, immigration and immigration checks. Because British banks and building societies are today starting immigration status checks on personal account holders, current account holders. So they have started carrying out these checks on all personal current account holders under government measures to encourage those in the UK illegally to leave. And these checks are going to be done against details of known illegal immigrants, which the Home Office is sharing with an anti-fraud organisation. So they say that once a bank or building society has found a personal current account that is being operated by an illegal immigrant, the Home Office will double check the details before instructing the bank or building society on what action to take, which may include closing the account. So there you go, the banks getting involved in immigration policy now.
Well, it's total control. This is big society being put into place. Big society wants to know everything about you: education, employment, your health record, how much money's in your bank, all of it to be locked together in this collaborative, innovative, transformative new society. It's a fascistic state, although I know David would discuss the exact name for it.
But David, let's get on to some Scottish news. And apparently you have a new brand of Scots person.
Well, we're getting new Scots because the ones we've got are no good.
I know that. I mean, you know.
They never vote the right way. You know, they've got their own opinions. It's just annoying. You know, we didn't vote to break up the UK, and that's a problem. And so we're going to have to get some new Scots because the new Scots might be a bit more pliable than the old variety. Now, if you put that little or even the next slide up, it's got a very interesting logo because this little logo down the bottom with all these people. These are all the new Scots that are coming. Now, you see, it's quite strange. Someone pointed this out to me on Twitter. You've got two men with two small children. So that's presumably two gay men with two small children. You've then got two elderly people, or a drain on the NHS, as we now call them. You've got a young boy alone. You've got a tall man overlooking the young boy, but obviously not anything to do with him. You've got a nice young girl with an afro, and then you've got two lesbians holding hands. So it was very politically correct logo, and I was amused to find that it's been updated. Someone must have pointed this out. And the little brown figures on the extreme left, one of those has had gender reassignment now, and on the current Scottish Government website is now a woman.
Good stuff. Now, in this New Scots Integrating Refugees in Scotland's Community document, we get three questions. Question one is, thinking about refugee integration in Scotland, what issues are important to you now? The next is, what changes do you want to see by 2020 and why? And the next is, what can you, your community and your organisation do to contribute to that change? And then they ask what happens next. And they say that all the feedback from this event is written up and sent to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government, COSLA, I'm not sure what that is, and the Scottish Refugee Council pulled together all of the feedback from events across Scotland. A new strategy is written, informed by the feedback, and published later in the year. And Scotland continues to welcome and support refugees into our communities.
COSLA is the local authorities. It used to be all the local authorities on it. Now it's just some of them. Yes, and do you notice the assumptions here? There's going to be refugees coming in. There's not going to be an end. This is not a temporary measure. This is not something that responds to a crisis that we're trying to solve, and then when the crisis is over, the immigration stops. And there's certainly no suggestion that anyone's going home. In their overview, they say Scotland has a long history of welcoming refugees and asylum seekers from all over the world. That's not true.
No, it's not.
They just made that up because it sounds nice. We want Scotland to continue to be a welcoming nation and support refugees, asylum seekers, and the communities to settle into. Refugees and asylum seekers are essentially a new phenomenon, certainly in the British Isles. We always welcomed refugees in terms of Britain. They generally came in the south coast because that was the bit that was near the continent. And you're looking at people like the Huguenots and what have you that are quite historical. There's not really been anything approaching this sort of manoeuvre in Scottish culture, in Scottish society ever. And they're trying to conceal the fact that it's entirely new by saying, no, it's always been like this, a similar way to America as a nation of immigrants. There's no change, there's nothing new. You're meant to accept an entirely new situation as though it's completely normal. The minister responsible, Angela Constance, MSP, one of Brian's favourites, I know. He had some very interesting things to say about her a few episodes ago. She talks about the New Scots. It's 30 years across Scotland, refugee communities have brought their skills, culture, language and food over successive generations. These refugees have contributed to Scotland, helping to create a proud, successful and diverse country we are today. Now, this is all very strange. The people who came to Scotland who brought things like their food were immigrants. They weren't refugees. These were people coming from Italy. In Scottish terms, there was a large Italian immigration into Scotland in the 20s or thereabouts, and they brought a lot of culinary skills, and they absolutely did enrich the Scottish scene. But they were economic migrants. They were not refugees. The use of the words is very interesting. They're trying to say that the Italians that came in the 20s and they integrated, but it wasn't without difficulty. There was violence, there was resistance, there was friction. Are the same as what's happening now. I don't think that's true. I think that's a lie.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now let's look at Scotland's Chief Constable. Yet again, I mean, because you mentioned some things about Scotland there, but I didn't hear the word corruption mentioned. But here we go. No minutes at the meeting on Chief Constable Gormley's future.
This is a remarkable little story. Now, what we've got here is the incredible Scottish Police Authority met in the 8th of November and informed Phil Gormley that he was welcome back. Everything was forgiven. He had the unanimous, quote, unanimous backing of the board of the Scottish Police Authority to return to his duties.
Now, just remind us quickly what it was they'd done wrong.
Well, the PERC, the Internal Investigation and Review Group within Police Scotland, are looking at multiple, I think at the last count it was 5, allegations of bullying, harassment, and generally being not nice to co-workers.
Right.
So people who work for him in Police Scotland have raised complaints. So there's been multiple complaints, and these are being assessed by PERC. So he was told on the 8th of November he had the unanimous backing of the Scottish Police Authority, and give him his due. On the 9th of November, he was driving from England back to Scotland, and the phone went. He was contacted by the former chair of the SPA, Andrew Flanagan, and told not to continue his journey. The client was told that following a meeting between Andrew Flanagan and the Cabinet Secretary for Justice earlier the same afternoon, he was not to come back to Scotland as he was not going back into post. Now, this was then questioned as to whether this was interference by politicians into the operations of Police Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority. The politician concerned said, well, it was all above board. I'd be quite happy to share the minutes with anyone who wants to see what happened at that meeting. And then, lo and behold, when the Scottish Government and Civil Service was asked for the minutes do not exist. There are no minutes, there are no records. This is not the first time we've caught Scottish Government at this particular game.
Yeah, and the Scottish Police Authority Board, their members are hitting out against them for being a waste of time and useless.
Yes, this was some research by Dr. Ali Malik into the views of the board. And one of the comments here, every time we try to bite, the government removes a tooth. So it's a toothless watchdog. It's not providing any corrections to Police Scotland. Police Scotland have been hugely controversial since ever they came into existence. And because it's one integrated police force, you don't have anywhere else you can go. You don't have another authority run in a different way to act as some sort of counterbalance to say, we think that's a better way forward. It's one system, only one way, only one solution, and everything centrally controlled. So therefore, if that central control is in error, then the criminal justice system of your entire country is in peril. That's where we're at. The counterbalance to this is meant to be the Scottish Police Authority, and the Scottish Police Authority has been described as operating in a Kremlin-like fashion. So every bit of concern we have about Police Scotland is reflected in the Scottish Police Authority. There is no oversight, there is no clarity, there is no transparency at all in these matters in Scotland.
And the Daily Record here reporting that former Justice Secretary Kenny McCaskill saying that Gormley needs to go even if he is cleared of bullying claims. Is this likely?
Well, no, because they'd have to pay him quite a lot of money, and it's been tremendously difficult to get anyone to take this post. I think he'll see out his contract personally. But yes, Kenny McCaskill, the former Justice Secretary, much beloved of the Holly Gregg Justice team, who call him the donkey, is saying that the former the police chief has got serious questions over his leadership. And he should, quote, depart with dignity. I think that horse has already left the barn before his contract expires at the end of the year, rather than staying in his position, quote, like a bad smell. So, he's not getting great press. But we've been here before with Sir Stephen House.
Yes, indeed. It seems to happen with every new chief constable you get. If he does go, I wonder what you will end up with.
Well, who knows? I mean, so Stephen House you talked earlier about Leveson and press not having the power to report things. In Scotland, what we had, Stephen House had left his wife and children and not only taken up with a gay lover while he was still running Police Scotland, but they were living in the castle at the police college together. And no one knew this. All the police knew it, I mean, every policeman you talk to knew about it, but no press outlet in Scotland reported a word about this. The people of Scotland didn't know the nature of the man who was running their police service. They didn't know about the decisions he'd made, the lifestyle he had chosen, or how he was conducting himself, so they couldn't form any view. This is the type of thing that lack of press freedom gives you.
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you very much for that. Just thinking what we've covered in the news today, it's really quite remarkable. We're talking about censorship of the press. We're talking about government departments which should be serving the public are gently being spread out into the corporate sector. We've got the fact that just one in six people believe that the BBC is trustworthy. We've got forcible flu vaccinations. We've got the suffering of people, migrants who are leaving their homelands to find another country. We've had the death of Peter Sutherland recently, the man who was saying this has to happen because it's political policy. We're witnessing something very, very dark starting to take over our society. I think I mentioned fascism. Is it communitarianism? David, very quickly, we're on the time, stops for time. What is it, do you think, that is starting to control our political and social and society and communities? What is it?
Fascism is the right word, but the problem with fascism is it means many different things. Italian fascism and Spanish fascism is probably quite close to what we're getting. And economically, that's the system we've got, where you're allowed to have nominal private ownership, but everything's directed by the state. Therefore, the state picks the winners and the losers. It's not the marketplace and competition. Take the NHS. The state acquires resources by force, by taxation, and then is distributing those forces to selected private hands. This is a very corrupt, inherently corrupt system. If you look at the political sphere, you have people targeted almost at random. You can go through your life and everything's fine. Or if you run like Sabine, if you run into the wrong people at the wrong time and say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or simply cross someone's interests, and that person is well connected, then you have serious problems. That's the nature of the fascist system. It's inherently corrupt. It's also inherently flexible and movable. Unlike communism, which is very rigid in its beliefs, fascism is very, very flexible. It will respond in a pragmatic way to whatever comes up in any given situation. So that's what you're dealing with. The reason it's so hard to pin down is it's a movable thing, but it's certainly fascism.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that. Well, we'll end today's news there. We'll say research what we've been talking about. Don't just believe the UK column reports. Check it out for yourself. And if you're concerned as we are about many of these issues, then talk, tell other people, alert them to it, because exposure of what's happening is at least 95% of the battle to fighting and stopping what's going on. David, thank you for joining us. We will be back at the same time on Monday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.